Hi everyone, I'm Louise. I'm a dietitian and a diabetes educator from Thrive Nutrition and Fitness, and this is an introductory course for type 1 diabetes. So if you have just been diagnosed with this condition or know somebody who has, this is for you. What we're going to be talking about today is carbohydrate counting. How do I know how many carbohydrates are on the plate of food that I'm about to eat in order to match my insulin accordingly? So let's start by talking about carbohydrates. What exactly is a carbohydrate? By definition, it's a big molecule made up of tiny building blocks called glucose. So lots of glucose all stored together makes a carbohydrate. And a carbohydrate is a macronutrient, a big nutrient that our bodies need to function and to survive. We have protein, fat, and carbohydrate. It's one of those. And all the food in the whole world is made up of a combination of those three things. Now, to make things easier, we divide food into different food groups, and the foods in each group have similar characteristics. Now, only some of those food groups contain carbohydrates, and so those are the ones that we are going to be focusing on today. The first food group is the starch food group. Starchy foods like rice, like bread, like pasta, these contain carbohydrates. Okay? The second food group, the milk and milk products food group. So milk, yogurt, those things contain carbohydrates. Next, we'll look at fruit. Fruit contains carbohydrates. And then vegetables. Now, veggies can be divided into two categories. Some veggies are very watery, cucumber, tomatoes, and don't contain much carbohydrate, so we don't need to worry too much about them. But the veggies that you can puree and feed to a baby, that's kind of the rule of thumb, like butternut, like peas, those foods contain carbohydrates, and they need to be taken into account. Now, there are a few different methods to use when carbohydrate counting, and the first and probably the most common is just to simply read the label of the food. Very, very important to know how to read it properly. So what we do is we look at the back at the nutritional information. We see total carbohydrates. So underneath that you might see of which is sugar. Ignore that. We want to look at total carbohydrates, and that will give you a value in grams. Most of the time they'll give you grams per 100 grams. So the most important thing here is to turn that label over and to see how much is in the actual packet. How many grams does this food in this packet weigh, and how much of it you are actually going to eat. So if it's a packet of crisps or something, you'll probably eat the whole packet. If it's a 45-gram packet of crisps and they say it's 20 grams of carbohydrate per 100 grams, you will need to do a little bit of maths to see how many grams of carbs are actually in the portion that you ate. Okay? If you eat 200 grams of something and it has 20 grams of carbohydrate per 100 grams, then you know that you need to double that because you ate double of the 100 gram, you ate 200 grams, so you need to count 40 grams of carbohydrate. The second method that works very well is to weigh your food. Now, there are lots of resources available on the internet, like MyFitnessPal or Carbs and Kales, where you'll be able to see how much carbohydrate or how many grams of carbohydrates are in 100 grams of a specific type of rice or in 100 grams of a specific type of pasta. And then you take your portion, cooked, and weigh it. And then you can do that maths the same way we spoke about for the labeling to see how many grams of carbohydrates are in your particular portion of that product. And a great thing to do is to do that a few times and try and figure out in terms of like cups or half cups or serving spoons of that product would give you a certain amount of carbohydrates so that you don't always have to weigh your food. You know that if you're having rice and you use that serving spoon, it's going to have 30 grams of carbohydrate in it. So the aim here is not to spend your whole life at the scale, but it's to get to a point where you do it enough that your estimations become quite accurate. A great tip here is to make a list of foods that you commonly eat with the portions of them that you usually take. So for example, you normally have oats or all bran or Weet Bix for breakfast, and you know that you use 2 blocks of Weet Bix with half a cup of milk, and you've counted the carbohydrates for that breakfast. Write it down and stick it on a list in the kitchen so that each time you don't have to sit and count and read the label and weigh and think about what you're doing. You literally just put that food in front of you that you often eat, and the carbs are counted, they are on that list, or they are in your head, and it just makes things a lot easier for you moving forward. Now, the aim of carbohydrate counting is to give you more freedom and flexibility in your eating. It is not to make you feel frustrated and tied down and unable to just eat freely because you have to now read the label or weigh your food or count things. That's not the purpose. So a great mindset to have is when you start to just be very, very diligent, very detailed and meticulous, so that you almost become very accurate in your estimations of your carbohydrate counting. So that when you move a little bit beyond that, you either have lists of the carbohydrate content of commonly eaten foods, or you are very skilled at eyeballing the food on your plate and estimating the carbohydrates that you're about to ingest. Once you've got the skill of carbohydrate counting down, it's a lot easier for your healthcare professional to work with you using insulin to carbohydrate ratios. The sole purpose of learning how to count your carbohydrates is to adjust your insulin. So this skill now must be used with an insulin to carbohydrate ratio. And that is what is going to give you the freedom to eat whatever you want, whenever you want to, within healthy guidelines, of course. So for example, if you know you're about to eat 40 grams of carbohydrates and your ratio is 1 unit of insulin per 10 grams of carbohydrate, you know that you need 4 units of insulin to cover that meal. And if you want to eat double, you want to eat 80 grams of carbohydrate. Knowing that and being able to count those carbohydrates will help you to then calculate how much insulin you need for that meal, and you would give yourself 8 units. So you adjust your insulin according to the insulin to carbohydrate ratio, according to the amount of carbohydrates that you're about to eat for that meal. Just remember as well that you need to add your insulin sensitivity factor. So if you need to correct your blood glucose because it's too high, you do need to give a little bit of extra insulin depending on that ratio to then cover that meal and to help correct your blood glucose and bring it down to the target. And that is it for this video. I hope it was valuable to you. If you have any questions or concerns, please write them in the comments section below. You're also very welcome to get hold of me if you want some individual support in terms of your ratios, or if you want things explained in a little bit more detail. Remember to like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. More content will be coming out, and we'll see you at the next video.